Football Podcast, joined as always by Clinton Boring. My name is Ryan Satkowiak, and we are truly stretching the bounds of the Midwest College Football Podcast tonight. We are going back to our roots. We are bringing MACtion to the show, talking some Mid-American Conference football, and to help us discuss the greatest conference in college football, we are pleased to be joined by Alex Scheer of the Mac Sports Connection podcast. Mr. Alex, sir, thank you so much for joining this evening. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing well, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the chance to preach the gospel of MACtion, as I like to tell people. And you were spot on. Greatest conference in all of college athletics. A lot of grit and grind in this conference, and glad to be talking about it.
I think it kind of gets lost in the shuffle now just because football is on every night of the week, but this is the pioneer conference of the midnight November game is the Mid-American Conference, right? Like that's how MACtion became a thing, because it was the only conference that would play the weeknight games in November. And more often than not, some crazy stuff would happen that you've never seen before that makes absolutely no sense. And it was always fun and magical. And the tradition lives on. Clinton, sir, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good, man. I'm pushing through the end of my my chart reviews for work. We got our first T-ball game tomorrow night, which I'm pretty excited for, to see my little man. And heading into Mother's Day weekend. Boys want to do breakfast in bed for my wife. I don't think they understand that means you have to wake up before mommy to make that food to give it to her in bed. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm excited to talk some MAC football, man. Repping the OU shirt tonight. Go Bobcats, defending MAC champs. So sorry for all the other MAC people I tagged who are tuning in tonight, but the Bobcats reign supreme right now. And just touching back on the alma mater, I spent 7 years of my life as an Ohio Bobcat. My wife and I, we met there, so we are Bobcat loves. And then we still try to get down to OU whenever we can while managing 2 children. But I'm looking forward to learning from Alex. As I said pre-show, Ryan and I kind of made a promise between the two of us, if we're going to put MAC in our podcast header, that we need to do a better job getting into the MAC this year for you guys. This tweet was pretty damn popular last night that I put out for joining the show. So hopefully all those who know Alex or from the Sidelines Twitter pages that follow us, hopefully you guys are tuning in tonight. You can find us on YouTube at ITP-CFB. Please hit like and subscribe to the show to help us growing. We're almost to the triple-digit mark on YouTube. It's been a slow but steady growth process, almost to 100. So if any of you guys are out there listening, give us a subscription there and help us keep growing. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram, ITP-CFB. And then if you can't catch us live, you can catch us the next morning in your preferred podcast feed.
So I think Alex, your affiliation with the schools that you have attended, I think segues perfectly into this conversation tonight, because it's 2 of the more perennially interesting programs in the MAC, because regardless of the ups and downs that we've seen throughout this conference, and I mean, you can just look at the last 10 years and you've had a number of programs that have been up, a number of programs that have been down, but 2 of the really 3 if we're going to talk about the hated Miami Redhawks in here as well, but 3 of the most consistent programs in the MAC the last decade, with defending champion, the Ohio Bobcats. We have the Toledo Rockets, who had a little bit of a down year last year, but I do want to start talking about Ohio because, we have, all 3 of us have affiliations with Ohio. It's the best college town in America. I love Athens. I miss Athens, but it was a team that, with Frank Solich's retirement a few years ago, he passed the reins to Tim Albin, and he kept the train going. And even heading into last year with a number of transfer portal defections, most notably the Maple Missile, who led Indiana to the playoff, Curtis Rourke, they still came in. They lost to Miami in the regular season, but they got him back in the MAC title game. And it's another offseason where Ohio is going to have a number of transfer portal defections. The head coach himself went to Charlotte. So they're staying within the pipeline. Brian Smith promoted to head coach. Just kind of looking at this team, I did want to start with Ohio. And maybe we can kind of spin this into more of a big picture top of the conference talk. But looking at what was lost, what are you kind of looking at for this team heading into 2025?
I think anytime you lose a head coach, that's tough, right? And you know, I wish Tim Albin all the success in the world. He did what 56 years of coaches hadn't been able to do, and that was win a MAC championship. They've been so close so many times. Just 2 years ago, Ohio lost to Toledo in the championship. In fact, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. We've seen 3 different MAC champions, and only 3 different teams have played in the MAC title the last 3 years. Ohio, Toledo, Miami.
Wow, that's crazy.
And none of them have repeated. I talk about, you know, just absolutely insane. But again, I think anytime you lose a head coach, that is a tough thing to kind of deal with. Tim Albin has left his mark, as we all know. He left for Charlotte the day of the championship. They're literally on the bus ride home, and the tweets go out. Then Tim Albin has agreed to be the next head coach at Charlotte, which a little bit more money. I get it. Charlotte, weather-wise, a little bit more desirable than Athens, Ohio. And I think a recruiting hotbed. If we're being really honest with ourselves, that whole East Coast kind of region, there's a lot of talent out there and a lot of opportunity. So I certainly wish him the best. But the biggest thing for me that I love with this team, you've got Parker Navarro coming back. That stands out as kind of the biggest thing. But you've also got the guy who orchestrated this offense coming back in Brian Smith. You know, Brian Smith was promoted to head coach. And I think for me, that's going to be one of the most important things. They've got a kind of a funky non-conference schedule. You know, I love the West Virginia game at home, middle of September.
Going to be there.
18th. Should be a great game. Last time OU welcomed a Power 4 team to Athens, they won. Shout out to the Fighting Matt Campbells, the former head coach at Toledo. So I'm really excited about this non-conference schedule, but it's brutal. The game at Rutgers, you got West Virginia, and then you've got Ohio State. You're at the Horseshoe, battle for Ohio. But I think what's going to be really interesting is defense. I think that's going to be the thing you have to really look at. Last year, Ohio gave up just 90 rushing yards per game. I believe that was good for 4th or 5th in the country. And they held Miami to under 70 rushing yards in the title game. So if they can repeat that effort on the defensive side, that's a recipe for a MAC championship. We saw it once already. They had some growing pains. They had a lot of things they had to get worked out. But I would not be surprised if this defense, even with the loss of some key players, you know, really, really think this defense could be just as good. They've got a lot of young guys. Picked up a couple guys in the portal. Nobody notable that I saw kind of looking through that list, but there's experience on the defensive side. The offense is going to be where I think people need to watch out. Parker Navarro can run and he can throw. For everything the Rourke brothers did at Ohio, Parker Navarro, you know, he did a lot of biding his time, waiting. Boom. Here I am. Let's play some football.
I certainly think one thing that's going to help that is the return of Bangura.
Oh, I love that.
And we saw him. Ryan and I were a bit baffled last year by his transfer, actually, given that Darius Taylor, coming off the freshman season he had for Minnesota, and just the talented back. And I believe I'm blanking on the Oklahoma back. Was it Major maybe last year that Minnesota brought in also from Oklahoma? That was a pretty loaded backfield for him to leave to. And money talks, bigger opportunities. I get it. I'm thrilled to have him back this year. The last time we saw him don the OU green, he was 2023. He had 178 carries, 811 yards, and 12 TDs in what feels like is the perfect complement to Parker Navarro. As you mentioned, the dual capability of him, both arm and legs. I guess maybe one part that Navarro we can see kind of improve this year is maybe the interceptions. Yeah. I mean, we only had 13 TDs passing last year, and so that makes the 11 interceptions look a little bit worse than if he were to throw for 30. But maybe a spot that he can improve. But anyone else of note on offense, maybe out wide that people should be? We've had a couple run of wide receivers here in the past few years at OU. Is there anybody we should be aware of?
Well, I think you know, some of the big losses that you're going to have. I mean, you're losing Coleman Owen. That for me, that's a massive loss. I think, at least last report I had, Chase Hendricks was returning. and Anthony Tyus was returning. Again, I could be wrong on these. That these guys could do an about face right now while we're doing this and make me look look the fool. But I think what benefits Ohio is you've got this run heavy offense. I mean, Ohio had multiple 1,000-yard rushers a year ago. Parker Navarro himself being one of them. And I think Brian Smith's going to lean into that even more now that he has full reign of the offense. Obviously serving as the offensive coordinator. But I think with him having full reign over this, I think that's going to be massive. You got Rodney Harris; he should be coming back. That's another guy who can play football. He had 23 catches last year, but this is a guy who I think could really have an opportunity to step up. Again, Coleman Owen stepping down or transferring out. You're making way for a lot of different guys, and I've got some of the numbers from last year. Caleb Gossett, 16 catches last year. Mason Williams, a freshman at tight end, had 19 catches for 211 yards. He had 2 scores. Anthony Tyus, he only had 16 catches, but again, he did all of his damage running. But there's a bunch of young guys who I think could really do a lot of damage. I mean, this is an offense that had, almost 2,700 receiving yards. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I would not be surprised to see them spread it around. This play action kind of run first offense that Brian Smith loves. You're going to see that again, especially with a veteran like Parker Navarro to kind of guide these young guys. You have to remember, Ohio was in that Syracuse game at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
That game ended up being a lot closer than a lot of people thought it was going to be. And that was with a whole brand new, really, offense, right? You talked about the transfers out at the end of 2 seasons ago. That was with a new look offense. And then they run through the Mid-American Conference. So you've got a lot of talent coming back. If you can just lock it in and make the defense even better, and that's going to be tough with some key losses. You make this defense even better. Ohio's poised for a repeat.
That's what I like to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned them being in the game with Syracuse last year, and you've already mentioned they've got 3 big boys to start the year this year. I'm excited. They're at Rutgers on the opening Thursday night, I believe, which is Ryan and I's first Pick'em show of the year. And last year we went live for the Minnesota UNC game, so we will get the joy of having our OU Bobcats on while we make our first Pick'em show. So I wrote the 3 down. I just want to know, of the 3, who is Ohio University most likely to upset, Alex?
Rutgers 24-20.
There we go, baby.
Here it is.
Opening season.
I'm going to tell you this. A year ago, and this is going to sound like I'm tooting my own horn here. A year ago, I said Notre Dame was going 1-1 against the Mid-American Conference. Notre Dame went 1-1 against the Mid-American Conference. Now, in fairness, I thought it was going to be Miami who pulled the upset. I can own that.
Mm-hmm.
They went 1-1 against the Mid-American Conference. I'm confident that this Ohio team can catch Rutgers a little bit off guard here. On the road, first game of the year. Nerves are a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio doesn't have the benefit of kind of overlooking Rutgers, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get to say, hey, look, we have a gauntlet for the next 4 weeks. Let's go out and just focus one game at a time. They're not looking ahead to, their FCS opponent. They're not looking ahead to, and I don't remember who it is. Is it Morgan State or something? I think that's Toledo, who Toledo's playing this year, actually.
Gardner Webb.
Gardner
Webb,
Webb.
thank you. So they're not looking ahead to that game right away. They know they've got 3 big boys. You can go 1-2 or 2-1 against the big boys. Watch out, AP top 25. I mean, that's starting the season off right.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let's I want to touch on the other half of last year's MAC title game, Miami, because it's. Yeah, I know we got to talk about them. We have to do it. We have to listen. Both big rival for both of my alma maters. I don't like Miami. I'm just gonna say it. Don't like them. So another quarterback dynasty of college football. Brett Gabbert moving on, but maybe the biggest portal off-season addition in the entire conference. Dequan Finn coming back to the MAC. Alex, I'm sure you're intimately familiar with his game, being a Toledo guy. But what do you see him bringing to this Chuck Martin offense?
I think this is going to be a very interesting dynamic. Jason Candle gave Dequan Finn a lot of kind of room to just, hey, do your thing. And for better or for worse, I think that it helped him win MAC Player of the Year. Of course, he had a great receiving core, Juwan Newton. He had a great backfield, headlined by Juwan Newton. A great backfield with Penny Boone and Jacquez Stewart. I mean, he had talent all around him. I know Miami's brought in a lot of transfers. Miami has had an unbelievable transfer haul this offseason. Dequan Finn is now old.
Yeah.
For a college football quarterback.
7th year, I believe.
I believe it's his 7th year, yeah. The year at Baylor did him no favors. Injured most of the year, ultimately went from starter to backup, and just dealing with a lot of other stuff. I think he's going to be fine. I mean, he knows how the MAC plays. He's played against Jason Candle in practice, or he's played against his defenses in practice. So Toledo's going to have to completely come up with a brand new scheme for him, which that game down in Oxford should be electric. That'll be 3 years in a row the teams have played in the regular season after not playing for 12 years. I'm really excited. I've got that one kind of circled on my calendar. But I think the dynamic he brings, he is a true dual threat quarterback. Turnovers. If you can force him to turn the ball over, you're going to win that game. I was at the Illinois-Toledo game back in 23, the year Toledo went 11-1 in the regular season. I firmly believe Dequan Finn does not throw a pick six in the first half of the third quarter. Toledo blows Illinois out. That pick six changed the dynamic of the game. Toledo was up multiple scores after the first 5 minutes of the third quarter. I think it was a 2.5 score game. Then Illinois took advantage of it. They took that momentum, battled back and forth. Had a great play by Luke Altmaier at the very end of the game to seal the victory. But I firmly believe Toledo wins that game and runs Illinois out of their own stadium. If you can get Dequan Finn shaken, and we saw in the MAC championship 2 years ago too, if you get him off rhythm, recipe for disaster.
So even just a couple years ago, I was so sad that we didn't get Finn versus Rourke in the MAC championship with Rourke being out for the ACL. But you mentioned the accolades for Finn. I mean, first team All-MAC in 2023, second team in 2022. At Toledo, we're not going to reference Baylor here because it's a forgotten year. 45 career games, over 7,000 yards passing, 63 touchdowns, and he added almost 2,000 more on the ground with 25 more scores. And he's the only quarterback in Toledo history to throw for more than 2,000 yards and rush for more than 500 in multiple seasons. And he didn't do it twice. He did it 3 times, 2021, 2022, and 2023. All the meanwhile each year, which you would expect with a quarterback, better completion percentage, 57, 59 to 63 in his last year at Miami. It pains me to say this as the battle of the bricks, but damn, they got a good one there. And I have a coworker who is a Miami grad. Shout out to you, Matt. I know you're an avid listener. We appreciate you. He goes by Melvin, so if he doesn't pick up on that. Yes, your Red Hawks will be good again this year. I will enjoy when the Bobcats beat them. Well, Ryan, let's flip to your other alma mater.
Do you want to? Well, yeah. So let's talk about the Falcons, because if Dequan Finn was probably the biggest transfer portal addition of the offseason, the biggest head coach addition of the offseason was Eddie George. And I think for Bowling Green, and I think my worry when Scot Loeffler left was not necessarily Scot Loeffler leaving, because when I was at BG and I wrote for the BG News my freshman year, one of my mentors, he had an all-time money quote that I never forget. He said, "The worst thing you want as a MAC program is for your head coach to be around longer than 5 years, because it means he's not good enough to get hired away, but he's not really bad enough for them to fire him to potentially bring in someone who could be better than him." And that was kind of
on that, but we'll,
okay. And I mean that's a whole different era of college football now, right? Because you're looking at, Chuck Martin's been at Miami forever, and Jason Candle's been at Toledo forever, and it just back in that early 2010s when you had Matt Campbell going to Iowa State, Dave Clawson went to Wake Forest. It seemed like the MAC was really that big feeder conference for coaches to the next level, and now it's almost like you have to be a Power 4 coordinator, given the roster construction demands. But I guess that's a tangent for later, I guess. But going back to Bowling Green, it really felt like that could have been a disaster with how late Scot Loeffler left in the cycle. And instead, I mean, it seems like they did as well as they possibly could have done bringing Eddie George back to Ohio, given his knowledge of the state, potential recruiting ties to the area. And for a program like Bowling Green, when you're having to recruit against Akron, Kent State, Toledo, these programs that you don't necessarily have these big differentiators against, having a former Heisman Trophy winner who played college football in your state seems like it could be a potential ace in the hole for recruiting purposes.
I think the MAC needed a kind of a splashy hire. You needed a big home run name that people were like, that's somebody we know. That's somebody we love and respect. And Eddie George is so loved and respected in the state of Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Heisman Trophy winner, the Buckeye. Fun fact: his first college touchdown came against Bowling Green.
Oh, wow.
All those years ago, I believe back in '92. So there, you know, there's history between the two programs with Eddie George involved already. And I think that this is going to be a massive benefit for Bowling Green. Obviously, everybody wants to point to his record at Tennessee State, and the biggest thing I always tell people, you can't purely look at record. The women's basketball coach at Toledo, who was just hired this past year, was her first year. People wanted to look at her record her last place is escaping me now. But you can't do that. You have to look at everything that they've done to build the program. If they inherited a dumpster fire, look at Scot Loeffler. I think he's a solid coach. He inherited an absolute dumpster fire. Beat Toledo in his very first year. That right there gets you a contract extension.
Yep.
You can't look purely at record. You have to look at what they've done. Eddie George has done a great job turning Tennessee State around, getting the Tigers back to the playoffs. I think they even want to share the conference championship this year, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And now you can start working on getting your guys in, getting the players you want in from the portal. This is a whole different period of time than it was when Eddie George was playing, right? You get a coaching change. The transfers didn't happen. You know, you toughed it out. You dealt with the coach that you were getting in, and that transfers were a rarity. Now it feels like, you know, everybody and their brother are transferring, whether or not they're an athlete. It's just the nature of the game. But I think a name like Eddie George brings in a lot of star power and a lot of excitement because people want to play for the superstar. Look at what Deion Sanders did for Colorado. You know, like him, hate him, love him, whatever. Deion Sanders brought a lot of attention to Colorado. Now, I don't think Eddie George is that, but I do think you're this close to Tennessee. You're from the state of Ohio. You know Eddie George. And you're fooling yourself if you don't. Like, he is a legend at Ohio State. He's a legend in the state of Ohio. I think there's a lot of star power, and that's going to be a massive boost to recruiting and eyes on the conference.
And what do you just kind of briefly make of expectations for Bowling Green in 2025? Because it's a roster that he's not inheriting anywhere near the same dumpster fire that Scot Loeffler inherited from Mike Jinks, which might be the worst hire in program history, if we're being honest with each other. Have you ever heard the story about how they hired him or how they came about to hire him?
I still can't believe that was allowed to happen.
Because that was so, for those listening who aren't intimately familiar with the Bowling Green football lore, Mike Jinks replaced Dino Babers when he went to Syracuse, and that was the like crowning era of Bowling Green football since Urban Meyer. A couple MAC titles. Matt Johnson. God, why is the receiver's name escaping me? Roger Lewis, I think it was a draft pick by the Giants. Garrick Dieter played for the Chiefs for a little bit. Very, very good offense. But then athletic director, I think it was Chris Kingston, wanted his team to have a really good offense. So he Googled best offenses in college football and found that was the Mahomes Texas Tech teams. He saw Texas Tech. He went and said, we're going to hire their associate head coach who had never been a coordinator before. And it was a disaster. Anyway.
His only head coaching experience prior to that was high school, if I remember correctly.
I do believe that is correct. So that went about as well as, in hindsight, maybe that blowing up wasn't that surprising. But with this roster, there's going to be a ton of turnover. And anytime you have a player like Harold Finn and move on to the next level, who was most of the offense last year, that's certainly going to be an adjustment. But even behind him, they're losing their top 4 pass catchers from last season. They're losing the quarterback. They're losing their top 4. The 4 guys they had on this offense last year with more than 100 rush yards for the season are now gone. So there's going to be a little bit of a hard reset, and they hit the portal to bring in old friend of mine, Drew Pine.
Drew Pine.
I love that portal grab. I mean,
It's,
we know what he did. We know what he's done in college. He was. I think overall he's a solid college quarterback.
Oh yeah,
I know it didn't pan out at Missouri, but like worked pretty well at Notre Dame.
yeah. They somehow won 8 games with him. He is certainly limited physically, but I mean, Bowling Green's not going to be asking him to compete for a college football playoff.
Right.
So just kind of given what is kind of resetting here, what do you view as reasonable expectations for this team in year 1 of Eddie George?
That's a great question. I think get people in the stands. And I know that sounds a little bit ridiculous. Like, well, of course, people are going to turn. No, you need to get people excited about Bowling Green football. You don't need to get them excited about Eddie George, the Ohio State player who works at Bowling Green. He's got a tall task of getting people excited about Bowling Green football. And that's going to be very, very difficult. I mean, you're bringing in Urban Meyer in the game against Lafayette to do the on-campus College Football Hall of Fame induction. So another guy who got famous through Utah and then through Ohio State, going to his old campus with a coach who played at Ohio State in his first ever game at Deutsch Perry. It's just, to me, it just feels like you got to get people excited about Bowling Green football. This year, Bowling Green, despite their record, was a lot of fun to watch. To all my Toledo fans out there, I'm sorry. It pains me to say that. I'm physically withering away as we speak. Bowling Green was a lot of fun to watch, in part due to Harold Fannin. Connor Bazelak played an excellent complimentary role to him, giving him a lot of time and just letting him do his thing, and then just delivering strike after strike after strike. And I think that worked out well. Clearly, he was a third-round pick, right? But I think you got to get people excited about Bowling Green football. If you set an expectation of winning a MAC championship, which I know Eddie George talked about in his press conference, we're competing for a MAC championship this year. I love the aggressiveness. I love the intensity of that. I think people will be happy to see an 8-4 team. I think people would probably be okay with a 7-5 team if you beat Toledo, you beat Kent State, 2 of your bigger rivals. Kent State with the anniversary award. Fun fact. Still don't know where that plaque is. Nobody seems to know where that's at. But you beat Toledo. That is number one. He called him that school up north in his press conference. And he was like, just like my time at Ohio State, that school up north with their blue and gold. So he already understands the rivalry. He understands how to get people energized. But when I watched his press conference, there were people wearing Ohio State Eddie George jerseys. On Bowling Green's campus in a football press conference, introducing him as the next Bowling Green football coach. I get it. You're excited. I'm not saying get rid of the Eddie George jerseys. I'm not. I'm saying buy some Bowling Green apparel. And I think if the athletic department at Bowling Green's smart, and I know they are, they've got some great people working up there. Vince Breedis, the SID up there, I know he's got Scott Vandermeer's ear and is saying, hey, we need to be doing this. I think if you sell Eddie George replica jerseys with Bowling Green, with the number 20, you can even do the number 27 you wore at Ohio State or at Tennessee. You sell replica jerseys that say George. They're orange. They've got the Falcon on them. You're getting people excited about him as a Bowling Green guy. And I think that is the expectation this year. Get people excited about Bowling Green football, no matter who's at the helm. Because if he works out, to your point, he'll be gone in 3 or 4 years. Get people excited about the program now.
Absolutely.
You want let's just real quick, I don't want to spend obviously this entire time. Let's go through every team in the MAC, but given your knowledge of Toledo, let's just touch on that other side of the I-75 rivalry with a little bit of a, I don't even know if you want to call it a down year per se, but just comparatively for Toledo in 2024. You still go 8-5, but 4-4 in the MAC. You have an opportunity down the stretch to get back to the MAC title game, but you lose back-to-back games to end the season. That kind of takes you out of that. What are you kind of looking at for the Rockets this year in 2025 and expectations for them?
I think you have to look at what he brought in the transfer portal. Jason Candle, going back to your point about the coaches who aren't leaving the conference after however many years. Jason Candle wants to be a head coach. He's made that incredibly clear. And I think he's good enough to be a head coach, even at a Power 4 level. I think that the MAC has plenty of coaching talent. Chuck Martin, another guy who I think could probably be a quality head coach at a Power 4 level. You've got Thomas Hammock over at Northern Illinois, another guy who has done great things. He's been in the MAC championship. He's won the MAC championship. He's done great things at Northern Illinois. We literally just saw him beat Notre Dame a year ago. These guys aren't bad coaches. They scheme well. You talked about Matt Campbell going to Iowa State. The former Buffalo coach is now at Kansas, left after 2020, 2021. And these are guys who are still quality. We've seen Kansas start to slowly turn around. So all that to say, I think Jason Candle, expectations are high at Toledo like they always are. You can look anywhere. Toledo claims they brought in the number 1 transfer portal class. Miami claims that they brought in the number 1. So it just, however the rankings work, Toledo, the expectations are incredibly high. They brought in some great guys. They brought in guys from Michigan State, Purdue, Cincinnati, a Northern Illinois offensive lineman who was part of that offensive lineman that gave NIU a chance. An offensive lineman from Pittsburgh, a cornerback from Wisconsin, and then a running back who was at Arizona State, Ohio State, Kentucky. Not to mention,
Chip Trainum?
I'm sorry?
Chip Trainum is at Toledo, right?
Yeah, DeMonte Trainum. Yeah,
I can't believe I forgot that. Yeah, dude,
Yeah,
you guys
he,
got that's a stellar back.
Yeah,
He is a freaking
absolutely.
beast.
And then you got Trayvon Rudolph from NIU coming to town. So I think you've got a lot of great talent. And Jason Candle has done an excellent job of, for the most part, he wins the games he's supposed to win. Last year, we saw a glimpse of winning games you're not supposed to win when he beat Mississippi State. Sorry, when they eviscerated Mississippi
Blew
State.
them
Damn right.
out.
And then you go into 7 overtimes with Pittsburgh in a bowl game. There are glimpses of greatness with this team, and that seems to be the thing Toledo fans forget. And I say this as probably a diehard Toledo fan, but a guy who understands the perception and reality of the conference. Toledo is almost expected year in and year out to be in the conference championship game. We have seen so much turnover in this conference in terms of talent, in terms of coaches, in terms of just every little thing. We have not had a repeat champion in forever. You don't do that since, I believe, 2011, 2012. So NIU, back when they were going to the Orange Bowl, they repeated back-to-back years. And then they lost to Bowling Green in 13, and then they won in 14, and then they lost to Bowling Green in 15. You don't have a repeat. It doesn't happen anymore, and that's okay. Toledo fans need to temper expectations in this new chaotic world of the transfer portal. You want your team competing for MAC championships, donate to your NIL collectives, help bring in transfers. That's plain and simple. But I think Toledo is going to do a great job this year. Jason Candle has always had a pretty good pulse on what his team's done. It also helps when you've drafted 2 guys in the top 65 picks of the last 2 NFL drafts. When you send guys to the league, Jason Candle sent, I believe, 11 players to the league via draft over the last 8 years.
Wow.
That's unheard of as a Group of 5 school.
Absolutely.
That's unheard of as a MAC school, but as a Group of 5 as a whole, that is unheard of. So that expectation is there to continue that. So I get the frustration. We're sending guys to the NFL. One guy does not make a team. Quinyon Mitchell, as great as he was, could not play all 22 positions on offense and defense. Like, it just doesn't happen. So you put the guys in the position you can. Tucker Gleason's going to be great this year. I have no doubt about it. Another year to really dial it up. They've got some great young receivers coming in. Braceville, I forget his first name, but he's going to be another one who's going to have a great year. This is a talented team. If you're a Toledo fan, stick with your coach. You know, there's a guy on Facebook all the time. Every time Toledo doesn't do anything right, fire Candle, fire Candle. It's like, listen, guy, I don't have to explain to you that Candle's the only coach who's won you a MAC championship since Toledo Tom. Tom Amstutz, who was the coach who beat Michigan back in 2008. A title hadn't been won since 2004. 3 other coaches did not win titles in that period. Don't fire the guy who's gotten you the most draft picks, who's got you a first-round draft pick, who's won you 2 MAC championships. You're an idiot. Sorry.
Yep.
If you're listening, you're an idiot.
Well, that draft pick in Quinyon Mitchell can now flash some extra gear there on his finger after a Super Bowl with the Eagles, right, to help that a little further.
Almost had a Defensive Rookie of the Year, too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, including Toledo in this conversation, in addition, we can pull BG in. We're going to exclude OU and Miami. They competed in the MAC title last year. Throw BG in, but other teams you can see kind of competing for this MAC title in 25. We got Buffalo. Well, to qualify for this, you had to be 500 or better, is what I put for this question. Buffalo, Toledo, Western Michigan, and we'll give in IU since their final year, and then they're leaving the MAC to go somewhere else. But if you look at some important facts here, per Bill Connolly, this was, again, I believe, end of February, he put out his returning production article. Toledo is where they were ranked 48th in returning production, Buffalo 67th, and on a different site I saw Western Michigan was sitting at 64% of their expected return. So given kind of these teams here, of those teams, who do you think has the best shot at competing for a MAC title in 2025?
I think you gotta say Miami. I mean, Chuck Martin's done a great job. I think you gotta say Ohio. I think you gotta say Toledo. I mean, those are the usual suspects right now. But I think in terms of kind of an underdog, I would not be surprised to see Bowling Green sneak in there, or Buffalo. Those are kind of the 2 I'm keeping an eye on. I think that Buffalo, under Pete Lembo, they had a great year last year, kind of building everything. Buffalo's kind of one of my dark horses right now. I think Lance Taylor up at Western, he's done a great job, and they're close. They're so close. They're another one that I think you have to keep an eye on. But I'd say, honestly, Buffalo and Western are probably my 2 dark horses. Matthew Drinkle, the new head coach at Central Michigan, you know, he's installing a whole new offense. They're going to look totally different next year. I'm really excited about that. And Mike Removich out at Ball State, coming up from Butler. I mean, again, same thing. A lot of coaching turnover in this conference this past year. I know Akron with their new NCAA hammer, no post, which you know that sucks, right? You know, you want to win football games, and now your motivation to kind of win football games, you've got 2 motivations: go undefeated and just kind of give everybody the middle finger, or just whatever, like, and pull a Kent State. And if you're Akron, you don't want to do that. Joe Moorhead does not want to do that. But I also think Kent State, you know, their current head football coach is now the, you know, Prime Minister of Canada. So it's, you know, he's going to have a hard time doing 2 different jobs. But no, I think you got to look at UMass. They're excited to join the conference. They're going to be trying to make a splash. I don't think they're going to do it in year 1. But watch out for UMass to make a little bit of noise to make the standings interesting late in the year.
Man, what a year that would be for Western Michigan fans if they were able to make a run there after the hockey team won the national title. I was That's awesome. I love that for well, one, I love it because now Miami is the only MAC Division One hockey program that has not won a national title. But it's just it's given that, I mean, not to turn this into a hockey conversation, but given that Bowling Green is also a hockey program, it just gives you kind of that thought that, okay, look, you get the right guy in place, it can be done. But shout out to the Western Michigan fans. I was looking at the old the Wikipedia page of the past MAC title game results, and it has the listed attendance here, and most of these are in kind of like the 18, 20,000 range, and then you had the year that Western played Ohio, and the attendance for that game was 45,000.
Wow.
Those fans travel, man. They are
Those fans
intense.
and then that was the year they went to the Cotton Bowl. So those fans
Yep.
knew what was on the line. They were
Mhm.
undefeated, and Ohio was so good that year. That,
Mhm.
I talk about all those heartbreaks Ohio's had. They were so close that season, and it just they've been close against Northern Illinois. They've been close so many times. I've got Western's schedule here. I guess we can kind of I'll briefly dive into this.
Mhm.
Their toughest game, I think, probably Sparty.
For sure.
What about
That's
Illinois?
Game one. You drop game one. You drop a close one. Game one. Then you run.
Oh yeah, you do have Illinois in there. You do have Illinois. That is
You
tough.
do have Illinois, and for what Illinois has done, they've done a great job kind of rebuilding the thing. And I believe Luke Altmaier is back as quarterback this year, so that is going to be a tougher matchup. And so that's fair, but you go 1-1 against the Big Ten.
Mhm.
You take care of North Texas, and North Texas is in Kalamazoo, so
Mhm.
that's a huge home game for you guys. Then you get Toledo at home. You play pretty well against Toledo at at Kalamazoo at Waldo Stadium. Then you get Rhode Island. Then you kick off UMass's run with the MAC with that game. But then you get Ball State, and then your toughest conference opponents outside of Toledo are Miami and Ohio. So you got a tough sledding.
Mhm.
You make it through the conference 7-1. You're in the MAC championship game.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like this could be a really good year for Western Michigan if things break the right way.
Well, then you mentioned Buffalo earlier, and that they were kind of my dark horse sitting there looking through this today. At Minnesota is a tough first matchup, of course. Drake Lindsey going to be a year one starter, but you got to go to BG again. We'll see what they are, but you get OU and Miami both at home to end the season, and you avoid Western Michigan in the season. So I believe a lot of their schedule is where we're looking at kind of the careful with my words here, bottom feeder of the 2024 MAC. It's a nice setup for them to potentially make that run, like you said there.
I wanted to kind of quickly look at Northern Illinois.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of tension between the NIU and
For
the
sure.
rest of the MAC fan base. And I'll say this, just to kind of, I wish Northern Illinois the best. I genuinely do. I disagree with the decision. I'm also not the legal experts and financial experts that they hired and spent thousands of dollars on to kind of bring in and say, hey, these are the numbers. I hope that they get exactly what they want on the revenue package and on everything. But I think it was a little bit of a messy divorce, and I think that's putting it a little lightly. But again, I want to be respectful to my NIU followers and to your NIU followers. It's a great fan base. They're great people, great coaches. It's a great school. I think Sean Frazier has had to do what he thinks is best, and I respect that. I will never, even if I disagree, I will never say that Sean Frazier is doing something wrong for his university if he feels it's the right thing. I will never say that about any AD. But I think NIU has the biggest target on their backs. Nobody cares that Ohio won their first title in 56 years. I mean, it's a great story. It's great for the headlines. Nobody in the MAC really cares about that. Sure, you don't want them to repeat, but NIU has the biggest target on their back. And they don't have an easy schedule either. You're at Maryland, you're at Mississippi State, and then you've got San Diego State before. And I think people are like, the MAC scheduled it this way. You welcome Miami for homecoming. You're at Ohio. You're at Toledo for midweek. You're at UMass for midweek. Then you play Western Michigan. You end the season with Kent State. You do not have an easy MAC schedule. This is a MAC schedule you could go 4-4 with.
Mm-hmm.
This is a MAC schedule you can go 7-1, 8-0 with too. You have a really tough road, and I know NIU knows they have that target, so they're going to look to play perfect football every single week, so that they can leave as MAC champions. Like the ultimate middle finger to the conference. Like, hey, we won. By the way, we're leaving. And I think that's a very real possibility. So do not be surprised if we're talking about Northern Illinois halfway through November. Like, they might go win this championship. Do not be surprised.
With the addition of UMass, and we'll get this real quick here, and NIU leaving, is there anything on the horizon of a team to fill NIU's spot or any other teams to the MAC that you know of?
I don't have any definitive information. What I can say is that the conference is always listening and always watching the landscape of college athletics. The chancellors of the schools always kind of looking at what's going on. The presidents of the schools looking at what's going on. So there's nothing in the pipeline that I'm aware of at this time. Never say never. In my dream world, the MAC gets to 14 and you bring in Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows if they're good fits. I like them. I think they'd be great fits. But who's to say? I think if you look to the FCS level, you maybe look at like an Illinois State or a Southern Illinois. I feel like that would be almost kind of comedic to bring in two other Illinois schools as one leaves. But I think if you're gonna look, you gotta. I think you gotta poke the bear in the Dakotas and say, hey, let's at least talk.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
And so I don't know. Again, I have no definitive answers on that. I wish I did. I wish I could say I know for a fact we're getting UConn. Whatever. Talk about how much of a home run home run get that would be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think you just gotta keep looking at the landscape. But the MAC's got to be a player. As much as I love this conference and have a lot of love and respect for this conference, I think the MAC has to be a player. UMass is fine. They're familiar. I think the basketball is a big bump. Some of their other Olympic sports like field hockey, that's a massive get. Miami's run this league for a long time. And now you bring in UMass, who is, I think they were in the Final Four of the women's field hockey NCAA tournament this year. So they are a really good field hockey program, and that's going to be massive for the Mid-American Conference. I'm a big field hockey guy. I don't know if you guys picked up on that.
I do love that. That's a fun sport to watch. I think this is there's a good point just overall about kind of the solvency of the conference, and this kind of segues into a big picture conversation I wanted to finish up with, because given just how college football has shifted even over the last 5 years and how we anticipate it shifting going forward, and it seems that there just seems to be this acceptance among most people that the Power Four is eventually going to consolidate into a Power Two, and it's not going to necessarily be everyone who's still left in the Power Four that's going to make that cut. So what happens with the rest of those teams? I mean, who's to say what's going to end up happening and what this sport is going to end up looking like? And I think for a conference like the MAC, I mean, you've more or less kind of withstood the weathers of conference realignment for the last decade plus. Kind of ironic that really up until this NIU news that the two moves were both UMass related moves over the last 10 years, adding them on two different occasions. But, now you have the Mountain West that's kind of come into your backyard and thrown a shot across the bow at you and taken one of your more successful programs over the last decade. And the conversation is more so what do you view the future of the MAC. And this is, and I get that it's hard to predict the future of this because we don't know what the playoff is going to end up looking like long term. But at least in this iteration of the playoff, let's just assume it stays like this for another 10 years, with the caveat of maybe it expands to 14 or 16 teams. As the conference is currently constructed, do you view this as a viable conference for a potential group of 5 playoff berth? And given that the answer to that question, do you think that adding something like, going into the Dakotas or adding, Middle Tennessee or Western Kentucky to strengthen the overall bottom line of the program to make it more competitive top to bottom could potentially help with that?
So I think there's multiple parts to this question. So I'm going to try to address each one as best I can. First and foremost, I think with the format of the new 12-team playoff, where a group of 5 team is automatically guaranteed, that increases the conference's potential for being a playoff team exponentially, right? You just have to be the top group of 5 team. Now, obviously, that's a little bit tough with the Boise States, with the Tulanes, with the Tulsas of the world. But I think there's a real path to being a playoff team. We just talked about how Northern Illinois could have a great year. We just talked about how Western Michigan could have a really great year. Western Michigan goes 11-1, wins the MAC. They're in the playoffs because 11-1 means you beat at least one Big Ten team, maybe 2, and maybe drop a conference game. I think that the path there is a lot more viable than it was when it was the 14 playoff. But I think that also presents its own challenges too. The MAC wants to improve their strength of schedule. You go out and schedule the Notre Dames of the world. The Notre Dames of the world lose to a MAC school. They don't schedule. They say, you know what? We're good.
No thanks.
Which, fair. In fairness, Notre Dame played themselves into a national championship game appearance. So that loss didn't really hurt them. But I think that's also kind of the other side of the 12-team playoff. Under the 4-team, that loss ends Notre Dame's shot at a championship.
Yep.
And in fairness, they didn't win anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I think you got to look at what the MAC can do now with what they have. They've got these games scheduled. Toledo's got Kentucky to kick the year off, and then they have Washington State out in Pullman later on this year. So there are some great opponents. If Ohio goes 11-1, wins the MAC, you beat 2 Power 5 opponents. Yeah, so I think there's viability. I think there's a real path for the MAC to get there sooner than later, especially with this fracturing of the Mountain West, kind of the resplitting into the Pac-12. I think that's where I'm concerned for Northern Illinois. I think that media deal is going to be a lot different for the Mountain West than what it is now when you're losing a lot of the big players, especially the Boise States, the San Diego States. Like, you're losing key players that made a Mountain West media deal attractive. You get the Chicago market with NIU, fine, whatever. But going back to the playoffs, it's viable and it's accessible now. The MAC just has to step up and take it. There's no reason that 2 years ago Toledo couldn't have been a New Year's Six team had they won the MAC. In fact, I think they would have been over Liberty. Liberty, yes, they ran the table. They went undefeated. They played 0 Power 5 opponents. And I think they were second to last or dead last in strength of schedule that year. Toledo was, I think, like 25 spots higher with 1 2-point loss. So I think there's value, and people see the value of the MAC. And the playoffs are a real option. And we were talking about Ohio being not a playoff team, but kind of getting access to a bigger bowl when they won the MAC last year. There are things that are constantly in motion. And I think the commissioner, Steinbrecher, he's doing the best job he can. I cannot speak to what he's done enough. He's brought a lot of national attention to this conference. and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. This is not a paid advertisement for John Steinbrecher, by the way. I just, I know him, and kind of going through this sports admin program through Ohio, there's a lot of things people don't see that go on behind the scenes. It's not as simple as, well, we need to schedule tougher teams. Well, a lot of the scheduling comes from the schools, first off. That's, Todd Kowalczyk at Toledo scheduled Toledo men's basketball games that aren't conference games. That's part of his job. That's not the commissioner's job. The commissioner can say, hey, let's do this Sun Belt MAC challenge, which I think has been a massive hit on the college basketball side. The commissioner doesn't make your schedules. People say, playing on the weeknights. We've had multiple first-round picks get featured on those weeknight games.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me there's no value there.
Yep.
Yes, the stadiums looked empty. I agree. That looks horrible. But there's been value because of that. I think the ESPN deal should be better, and it will be better after this next contract year. I'm hearing something in the $2.5 million range per school.
Nice.
That's purely speculatory. I fully admit that I don't have a real source on that. That's just based off of a bunch of different numbers, kind of guys running different things. So I'm hearing $2 to $2.5 million per school this next cycle. People don't understand. You can't just wave a magic wand. We're not the SEC. We're not the Big Ten. We can't say, hey, USC, come be part of our conference. And they say, okay.
Yep.
It's not as simple. Here's $50 million a year. The MAC can't do that. So you have to find what works for the brand to get people excited about coming to play in the Mid-American Conference. And that's the opportunity to now go and compete for a national championship. And I know people will say, Alex, you're insane. No MAC team is winning the MAC championship, or the national championship. You're probably not wrong. Nobody thought Western Michigan was going to win the hockey championship. Look at their NIL funding. Penn State outspent them almost 10 to 1 on NIL for hockey. Don't tell me it's impossible. Give us the opportunity to show you that we can do it, or not do it, whatever it is. Northern Illinois was not supposed to beat Notre Dame. Toledo was not supposed to beat Mississippi State. These things happen. And I'm just thinking, the gap is not as far apart for really everybody, but about maybe the top 15 teams from the SEC and the Big Ten. The gap is a lot smaller for everybody else.
Absolutely. It's got me excited, man. I don't like to rush football season by, but damn, I'm ready for some Tuesday night MACtion now.
Softball first here.
Right. Yeah, we got all summer, Clinton. Yeah, we do.
Man, I want to enjoy the weather, and this is what being a football junkie is, right? Like you have the thirst for it. You appreciate when it's gone because you need that time, right? This is why I don't do the UFL or whatever the hell they call that league now. I need my break from football to an extent because it just makes the want for it so much more come fall. And I am thrilled, again, as an OU fan, coming off a MAC title, to see this season. But having grown up in both Big Ten and MAC country my entire life and been to multiple OU blackout games on Tuesday or Wednesday nights and froze my butt off, I love the MAC. I appreciate everything that it is. I'm excited for this season to get rolling. For all these MAC teams to take their swings at some of these big teams that they're going to get their chances at to prove themselves.
Absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited. A lot of great football being played in the MAC, and a lot of great football to be played this upcoming year. A lot of opportunities to fly the flag.
Absolutely.
And Alex, before we let you get out of here, let the listeners know where they can locate your work.
Yeah, first off, guys, thank you both so much for having me on to talk this conference. I often joke that the Big Ten is in the backyard of the Mid-American Conference. So thank you for letting me talk to the big brothers of the Midwest, talk about the big brothers of the Midwest. And no, it's great. Again, appreciate you guys. People want to follow and see what tomfoolery I'm getting into with the Mid-American Conference. Over on Twitter X, it's at the MSC Podcast, and that handle is actually pretty consistent over on Instagram. TikTok. I know I'm trying to be young, cool, and hip. And then Facebook, of course, the MSC podcast. Trying to reach all the old grandmas and grandpas out there who might still have a transistor radio. And then on YouTube as well. You can find it, the MSC podcast. And then also through the Varsity Podcast Network, presented by Lairfield, available through there. Got some really cool things in the works. My co-host Graham could not be here tonight. Also a Toledo graduate, so a lot of MACtion from our side. We've got a mobile app that we've been piecing together. That I've been working on for about 2 years now.
Hell yeah!
That I think I'm really, really close to having launched this fall, and it's gonna take everything ESPN does and dial it in purely for the Mid-American Conference, including food stops, including...
no way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Let's go.
It's going to tell you, hey, I'm visiting the city of Bowling Green. What are the top 10 places to eat in Bowling Green that people
awesome.
like? Boom, drop-down menu. Here you go. You want fight songs? You want alma maters? They're going to be in there. You need the lyrics? They're in there, too. So we got a lot of cool things going on. I'm excited to bring that to life. Like I said, been working on that for about 2 years now, and we're close, and I'm super pumped to make that public.
It's fantastic.
Clinton, that's the ultimate road trip guide for you right there.
Absolutely.
I'm the guy. I'll hook you up. I got you.
I love it. Ryan, one of these times, we'll just have to do 2 football trips in 1 year. To hell with it. We'll do Big Ten and we'll do a MAC.
See, the good thing about the MAC is it's far easier to do in November because you just pick a Tuesday night and be like, look, I'm going to take a couple days off work and I'm going to go hang out in DeKalb, Illinois or Kent, Ohio.
Yeah, there we go.
I'll tell you this, guys. So 2023, I did a road trip, my tour of 12. I visited all 12 MAC stadiums.
Wow.
Nice.
And what works is, being in Northwest Ohio at the time, I was able to do, I hit up all the faraway games on Saturday. So I went to Buffalo on a Saturday, went up to Western on a Saturday, Northern Illinois on a Saturday, Ball State on a Saturday. But then I did everything a little bit closer. I did Toledo on a midweek, Bowling Green on a midweek, Akron and Kent State on a midweek. So made it really, really work. Oh, I did Ohio and then Miami on a Saturday as well. So
nice.
There's a way to do it. And what's nice with the midweek is you've got Tuesday and Wednesday. So you could knock out quite a few midweeks before the season's over. I think I did 17 or 18 games that year.
Nice. Yeah, if you get the right schedule draw, you play it correctly. You go Bowling Green on a Tuesday and then just go a little east down the Ohio toll road. Then you're going to Kent State on a Wednesday there. You just knock them both out in the same week.
And that's exactly what you got to do. Big shout out to College Football Campus Tour, Michael Barker, who's done 100+ games.
Mm-hmm.
If you need road trip advice, he'll be the one to give it to you.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. That is it for us tonight. We are going to be back with y'all on Monday next week. Speaking of Notre Dame, we will be wrapping up our kind of spring preview series. We've already done everything in the Big Ten. We've talked to MAC today. We will finish with Notre Dame on Monday. We're welcoming back Jack Sobel from the On3 Network to join the show for that one. Clinton, anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, guys, thank you again for joining us tonight. Thank you, Alex, for taking time out of your night to join us. I know you said you were busy with grad school and everything, so we appreciate you being here. Guys, remember, hit subscribe on YouTube, give us a follow on all the other platforms, and check us out on your preferred podcast platform there. Leave us a 5-star review to help grow the show. We appreciate y'all.
Thank you, everyone. For Alex and Clinton, I am Ryan. Have a great weekend. We'll see you guys next week.